Hola, soy Peter Graves. Bienvenidos a Biografía. En Warner Brothers trabajaban actores de carácter difícil como Cagney, Bogart y Edward G. Robinson. Pero entre los más difíciles había una mujer, Bette Davis. Sus discordias por guiones y repartos con el jefe del estudio, Jack Warner, son legendarias. Le ganaron a Betty popularidad y papeles protagónicos en algunas de las mejores películas de los años 30 y 40. Toda su vida fue una mujer que luchó por ser legítima en un medio dominado por los hombres.
You're too fine. You won't have none of me, but you'll sit here all night looking at your naked females.
Mildred.
You cad. You dirty swine.
Bette Davis se ha convertido en una de las actrices más legendarias.
You bored me stiff. I hated you. It made me sick when I had to let you kiss me. I only did it because you begged me. You hounded me. You drove me crazy. And after you kissed me, I always used to wipe my mouth. Wipe my mouth.
She used everything that she had, you know. She used her eyes and her vocal instrument, and she started doing things that people had never, ever imagined. I mean, she just hit that screen, and it was just magic.
Did you?
That meant to be me?
Looks like you, doesn't it?
Su carrera se extendió 6 décadas en las que hizo más de 80 películas.
She had wonderful character and stamina and tremendous resilience. She could be difficult, but she was in a very difficult business.
Puede que lamentablemente algo de ese gran talento y de ese frenesí que fluía de su actuación sea reflejo de los altibajos de su vida.
I really think I've been an incredibly fortunate person and had a most wonderfully happy life as regards the accomplishment of my life. I don't think it's an easy life, you know, I must say.
Nació el 5 de abril de 1908 en el humilde suburbio de Lowell, Massachusetts, bajo el nombre de Ruth Davis. Sus padres, Ruthie y Harlow Davis, eran una joven pareja a quienes sonreía el futuro. Harlow estudiaba Derecho mientras Ruthie cuidaba de Bette y de su hermana menor Bobby. Sin embargo, Harlow comenzó a distanciarse de su familia. Al parecer, la madre de Bette fue quien más sufrió y tuvo que ser hospitalizada. Harlow luego la traicionó y así la situación familiar empeoró.
I sensed something was wrong. I remember my father saying goodbye, and Mother told us that Daddy would not be living with us anymore. He was not very nice to my mother. From then on, my sister and I and my mother, we called ourselves the Three Musketeers. It was sort of us against the world.
Bette Davis had a very, very bad relationship with her father. He was a man who did not like children. And he particularly didn't like Betty because she was very loud, very insistent, very self-centered, a very demanding child. Her mother was just the opposite. Her mother was smothering and attentive and constantly taught Betty that she was the center of the universe. So Bette Davis became a very odd mixture of egocentricity and insecurity.
Ruthie Davis se quedó sola con 2 hijas menores de edad. Para vestirlas y alimentarlas trabajaba como fotógrafo.
He sent them to private schools, which she could barely afford. But every bit of money that she had went toward giving her girls a good education and giving her girls as close to the kind of life they would have had she stayed with their father as possible.
Aunque el divorcio de sus padres le causó un gran dolor, Bette pudo superarlo. Era muy activa en el colegio Cushing Academy, donde participó en el programa de teatro. Al finalizar sus estudios, Bette se lanzó al escenario. Ruthie viajó con Bette a Nueva York, donde cursó los primeros semestres de artes dramáticas. Luego, Bette trabajó con un grupo teatral en Massachusetts y actuó en el escenario de Broadway, donde captó la atención de un buscatalentos de los estudios Universal. En 1930 le ofrecieron realizar una prueba de cámara y un viaje a Hollywood.
In those days, when the movies were turning from silence to talkies, Hollywood needed people who sounded good on film. So Hollywood raided the Broadway stage quite a bit to get talent in the early 1930s, and Betty was one of those fortunate people who were in the right place at the right time.
Universal le ofreció un breve contrato, pero no fue fácil para Bette, pues no tenía la deslumbrante belleza de las otras chicas. De hecho, la llamaban la ratoncita café. Luego de una serie de películas, Bette decidió volver a Broadway hasta que recibió la llamada de una de las estrellas más famosas de Warner Brothers.
This very elegant English voice said, "Is this Miss Davis? This is Mr. George Arliss." Well, I said, "Oh, my dear." I thought it was some friend ribbing me. And this went on for about 10 minutes. He was very patient. He said, "No, my dear, this is George Arliss. And could you come out to Warner Brothers immediately for an interview?"
Bette firmó un contrato con Warner Brothers que la haría eventualmente una de las actrices más famosas.
You hated me ever since Peter. You can't stand the sight of me because you couldn't hold him. Stand. And it's not only Peter, it's Craig, too. You're afraid I could get him back, and I could if I wanted him. All I have to do is lift my little finger, and that's why you're tormenting me. Because you're jealous and you're getting revenge.
Bette Davis y su madre llegaron a Hollywood en 1930. No pudo haber sido mejor momento para una joven actriz dispuesta a trabajar. Estados Unidos atravesaba la Gran Depresión y no había mejor escape de las crudas realidades de la época que deleitarse con el encanto de actores y actrices en la gran pantalla. Los grandes estudios y sus sistemas de contrato de estrellas cubrían la enorme demanda de películas.
In those days, an actor was put under contract at a studio, and then they were the property of that studio. I mean, totally. They had no say, really, in what films they were going to make or how many they would make, or on their days off, what they'd be doing.
Aunque como actriz contratada de Warner Brothers, Bette tenía un horario de trabajo sumamente agotador, encontró tiempo para retomar un viejo romance de su época de estudiante con Herman Oscar Nelson.
They kind of drifted apart when Ham went to college and Betty started doing summer stock and things like that. When Ham graduated from college, he came out to Hollywood and started to court her again, and finally they got married. It was love at first sight when they first met, and he was a lover for life for many years. You know, she essentially married her high school sweetheart even after she had become a Hollywood star.
Contrajeron matrimonio en 1932. No obstante, Bette soñaba con ser más que una buena esposa. Quería ser la actriz más famosa de los estudios. Lo que no imaginó fue lo difícil que le sería tener que aceptar que le asignaran las películas en las que trabajaría y las fechas.
Bette Davis realized she had no choice. She was a young woman who was career-minded, and these were the rules of the game. So she had to play by those rules, and so in 1933 and 34, 35, she was making a lot of movies. You know, 4, 5, 6, 7 movies a year. And you look at those early films, and they just batted them out.
Honey, don't you love me anymore?
Do you think I'd get all steamed up like this if I didn't?
Oh, you're such a darling.
And you're such a fool.
Bette les comunicó que quería interpretar papeles de calidad y trabajar con buenos directores, pero Jack Warner, el jefe de estudio, la ignoraba. A Bette le asignaban películas tipo B.
You go out and grab yourself a square guy, see? A guy that works for a living, that can give you a home and kids and happiness, all that kind of stuff.
I don't want anybody but you.
Sin embargo, en 1934, finalmente le dieron a elegir. Le ofrecieron protagonizar en Of Human Bondage de RKO.
At the time of making Of Human Bondage, no female actress in Hollywood would play it. And it was shopped all over the place. And she read it and loved it and said, "I'll do it."
She was offered a chance to do Of Human Bondage for another studio, to play Mildred Rogers, who's a terribly vile woman. But she loved the role. She loved the challenge of playing this evil vixen who ruins a man's life for her own selfish ends.
Sin embargo, Jack Warner se negó a que trabajara en otro estudio, además de considerar que lo desagradable del papel arruinaría su carrera. Pero Bette no desistió.
She camped out at his office. When he got in at 7 in the morning, she was sitting there. And finally, he had to give in just to get her off his back. And her performance as Mildred really did change her career.
You're spying on me. I always thought you was a gentleman in every sense of the word.
Are you going out with Miller? He's keeping you waiting, isn't he?
Well, I'd rather wait for him than have you wait for me.
It was probably the rawest and the most vivid and the realest performance that had been put on film to that date. I mean, that was 1935, and she let herself look ravaged, which most actresses did not.
Come on now.
I have often wondered why I had such enjoyment from playing these women, but they are media from the standpoint of your craft. But they're also enjoyable to play. So I always, as I grew older, wondered if this was really in my nature, way underneath.
She was a professional from, the moment she got up to the moment, she finished the work day. And she is very organized, even when she wasn't working. She looked at her day as a work day.
Bette se sintió rejuvenecida después de filmar Of Human Bondage. Había sido su primer triunfo aclamado por los críticos. Esperaba entonces que el estudio le diera mejores guiones, pero no fue el caso. Su próxima película fue The Housewife.
She wanted to work all the time. She was an absolute workaholic. If she wasn't working, she was not happy.
La nueva interpretación que Jack Warner asignó a Bette junto a Paul Mooney en Border Town era la de una ama de casa que padecía desequilibrios mentales. Esta vez había complacido a Bette al asignarle un papel mucho más importante.
Bette Davis used her private life, her personal traumas very much for her performances. She would call upon her anger at her father, or her sadness at him having left the family to help her create the emotion that she needed for a scene.
She took great risks. Nobody had ever done anything like that she had done on the screen. I mean, nobody ever even saw what that was like, how she developed that.
No obstante, la libertad no le duró mucho tiempo, pues pronto se le asignarían papeles que no le agradaban hasta que se le ofreció participar en la película Dangerous.
Dangerous is in some ways a pretty silly movie. It's about a headstrong and impulsive actress, and it's a very actressy part. One of the interesting things in a lot of Bette Davis's movies is that she so overpowers the leading men. The leading man in Dangerous is an example of a kind of a wimp part and actor that Bette Davis just tramples, figuratively and almost literally, in that film, and she did that with a number of other leading men over the years.
Bette se sintió defraudada por la Academia de Cine al no haberle rendido honores por Of Human Bondage. Sin embargo, en 1936 fue la primera actriz de Warner Brothers en ser nominada y ganar un Oscar como mejor actriz por su interpretación en Dangerous. Pero ni siquiera con este magnífico reconocimiento se lograron aliviar los problemas que tenía con su esposo, Ham.
He was a band leader, and he would do gigs around town, and he had a fairly successful career, but he was making $100, $200 a week when Bette was making $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a week. In those days particularly, if a man felt he was being supported by his wife, it was very hard on his ego. Another big problem for them was she felt that had she had a baby, it would sidetrack her career, and she didn't want to do that. And Ham Nelson wanted to have children, so that put another strain on their marriage.
Se divorciaron en 1936 y la fama de Bette como actriz hizo que el acontecimiento encabezara las noticias en la prensa. Al poco tiempo, Jack Warner le informó a Bette que la había seleccionado para interpretar junto a Humphrey Bogart en The Petrified Forest, lo cual levantó su ánimo.
Gabrielle gave me this dollar.
You did?
It's none of your business.
Would you like to know what she was going to give me when those rats showed up? Would you like to know?
Well, speaking of rats, of all the low, slimy, stinky...
Now, Gabrielle, now you mustn't blame me.
Pero Bette no era fácil de satisfacer. El tipo de material que se le asignaba no le agradaba y además sentía que su contrato sencillamente no reflejaba el valor que ella representaba para el estudio.
Do you think I'm attractive?
Bad scripts, bad directors. Terrible scripts. Bureau of Missing Persons, Parachute Jumper, Housewife. Oh, just junk. And I knew that I would never attain my goal without good scripts and good directors. And so I walked.
She was a highly driven working woman, and a very forceful one, in a time when that sort of force didn't have the same currency as it does today. She had to fight for everything.
When I was growing up, I saw almost every movie that she made. And it was a family event for us to go to see a Bette Davis movie. In fact, my father, who hated movies, would go only to a Bette Davis movie.
To me, a star is someone who brings people into the theater. And Bette was capable of doing that.
It wasn't money, it was material, it was good vehicles. And she was the first always to throw laurels toward the system in which she worked, even though she was battling inside of it. She knew the value of the people that she was fighting with, and she met them pound for pound.
Viajó a Inglaterra y anunció sus planes de trabajar en películas inglesas. No obstante, Jack Warner no permitiría que se fuese tan fácilmente y la demandó.
She lost the fight in the English courts because they basically rule that a contract is a contract. No matter how bad and restrictive the contract was, Bette read it and she signed it. What happened as a result of the fight in England was that she gained the respect of Jack Warner, who realized he had someone here very special and that he should treat her better and should give her better roles.
She stuck by her convictions. If she took a point of view, and sometimes it might have been right and sometimes it might have been wrong, but she hung on to it. You know, once she grabbed a hold of it, she wasn't going to let go of it.
You can't get away from us, Pris. We're both in your blood.
Please.
And we'll never let you go. He stops at nothing. People just disappear and never heard of again. I don't want that to happen to me.
Bette se vio obligada a cumplir con el contrato y tuvo que regresar a trabajar a Warner Brothers.
Ultimately, I think she won because right from the start, they were forced to find better parts and better pictures for her. They may have done it grudgingly. I'm sure they did it grudgingly to a certain degree. But look, they wanted to make good movies too. And she became an asset to the studio because her name sold tickets. So it was not entirely altruistic that they went and bought Jezebel for her. It was her so-called consolation prize for not getting to play Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind.
To play it. To fight. But you can't fight married. Married, is it? To that washed-out little Yankee. Price is mine.
En Jezebel, Bette trabajó por primera vez con el director William Wyler.
William Wyler was very much a perfectionist, and he pushed Bette to become a better actress. She said he was the only man she had ever met who could tame her, and he did. He was a very strong man and a very strong director, and he respected her talent. He respected her ability to give a good performance without being told what to do by him. And she began a love affair with him.
Sin embargo, el romance duró poco tiempo y lo que es peor, su padre, Harlow, murió de un infarto durante las últimas semanas de filmación de Jezebel.
It was heartbreaking to Bette that she never was able to get to her father, to approach him, and that even when she proved herself, winning an Academy Award as an actress, he still wouldn't give her the kind of credit that she deserved.
Pero Bette había ganado la admiración de sus compañeros. En 1939 ganó su segundo Oscar por su actuación en Jezebel.
Miss Davis, I am very happy to present to you on behalf of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for the second time their award for your performance in Jezebel. May I be the first to congratulate you.
Thank you, Sir Cedric. I'm very grateful to members of the Academy and members of the Screen Actors Guild for this award.
Winning the Oscars that she did validated her position as kind of queen bee at Warner Brothers and one of the leading actresses in Hollywood. If there had been any question, and I don't think at that point there really was, I think that cemented it for her.
Luego de recibir el Oscar por Jezebel, Bette Davis fue nominada a Mejor Actriz durante 5 años consecutivos.
Meet Hollywood's monarchs of 1940. Their movie majesties Mickey Rooney and Bette Davis, winners in a nationwide poll, received their crowns from columnist Ed Sullivan.
Thank you, Ed Sullivan. You give the nicest crowns. You know, this is the kind of a hat that any woman would adore wearing. I shall always keep it shiny.
La actuación de Bette ganó la admiración de todos, pero su carácter la hacía una compañera de trabajo muy difícil.
Every now and then I would run into a director who was very conscious that I was a female, and therefore he must not give me my way or let me play the scene the way I wanted to. But that never discouraged me. We ended up playing it the way I wanted to.
If she was upset about something, she told you right straight off exactly how she felt. She always used to refer to herself as a Yankee lady, you know, that was just a straight outspoken woman.
She was very kind to people that she had respect for, and people that she didn't have respect for. She was a hellion.
She was a perfectionist in all aspects of life. I mean, she was it had to be her way. I mean, it was her way or the highway. If she didn't like a scene, she told everybody. If she didn't like the way she was being directed, she would have it out with the director. But she was a professional. She knew her lines. She'd be there when she was supposed to be there. She'd do her work, and she expected everybody else to do it the same way. And if something was not right or was stupid, she would tell them, this isn't right, it's stupid, change it. And if they were smart, they'd change it.
What good's riding and fighting these days? What do they get?
Bette Davis aceptaba papeles que rechazaban otras actrices. Estaba sentando un nuevo precedente sobre los papeles de las mujeres en la historia del cine.
She stepped out and brought out a side of women that was very a peek at them in a way that they'd never been peeked at before. Sexy, vulnerable, dependent, and full, who weren't afraid of saying anything. They could stand up against a man, a powerful man, and say, not tonight, maybe tomorrow, but not tonight.
1940 fue un año de mucha actividad para Bette, pero tomó vacaciones para relajarse.
Betty met Arthur Farnsworth on a vacation in New Hampshire, and he was working at the resort that she was staying at. And he was kind of an escort for single ladies. He was big and he was handsome and square-jawed. And he and Betty just hit it off very well, and they were married, and he came out here and once again became Mr. Davis.
Luego de 3 años de matrimonio, Arthur Farnsworth murió de una lesión cerebral. Incluso en medio de esta tragedia, Bette continuaba persiguiendo sus objetivos profesionales al tiempo que se dedicaba a ayudar a su país.
Any bond that you or I give as a present is much more than a gift. It's a Christmas blessing to those men who will be far away on this Christmas day, many under actual fire.
La Segunda Guerra Mundial estaba en su apogeo cuando Bette ayudó a organizar salones bailables en Hollywood como entretenimiento para los soldados de paso por Los Ángeles.
If you've ever been to Hollywood, one thing you're sure to remember is this converted barn in the heart of the city. Here, under the leadership of Bette Davis and John Garfield, all the guilds and unions in Hollywood have collaborated in creating and maintaining the Hollywood Canteen. More than 1 million servicemen of the United Nations have been entertained here by almost everybody in motion pictures.
Their power was so enormous that they were able to persuade all parts of the industry to join into this extraordinary execution of this canteen for servicemen. And all the stars went there in shifts to work. I was a busboy there every Wednesday and Saturday night.
I was head of it, and I was responsible for it. It was very exhausting because I was working in all those years very hard. But oh, how worth it. And we had to have it because the servicemen that came through here never saw any Hollywood people. And of course, that's what they wanted to see. So that we provided.
En 1945, el amor tocó las puertas de su corazón nuevamente cuando conoció a un apuesto marinero. Después de un mes de haberse conocido, Bette y William Grant Sherry se casaron.
In 1945, she had her daughter, BD. She took almost 1.5 years off from the screen. And it was what she had feared earlier, having the forward momentum of the career stopped. And by the time Betty got back, she looked considerably older from having had the baby. The movies she made were not successes. And she was becoming more and more difficult as she became a bigger and bigger star, more and more demanding, more and more temperamental.
Bette firmó un nuevo contrato con Warner y en 1949 comenzó a filmar Beyond the Forest.
And so I decided that if after all the proof I had given of what I wanted to do with my career, that I was still having to argue after 18 years about an unsuitable property that I was doing, that I just had to branch out because I had a 10-year more contract. So it did take courage to go. It would have been nice and easy, but that was never for me anyway, being nice and easy. So I got him, Mr. Warner, on the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, finally. And we had 2 more days of shooting. And I said, if you want this film finished, I get my release the day after I finish.
Beyond the Forest sería la última película de Bette Davis en Warner por varios años.
I came here to pride, me, Rosa Maline. And you don't want me, I'm not good enough. You taught me my place all right, just something for a weekend in the woods.
Finalmente, Bette logró liberarse de Warner Brothers y pensó que entonces su carrera comenzaría a brillar como nunca.
Betty expected that there would be tremendous offers of scripts and she would have the pick of all the best scripts of all the other studios, and it didn't happen. There was a lull after she left Warner Brothers. She didn't get the offers she expected, and it really threw her for a loop. I mean, Betty was used to working. She was used to getting her pick of very good scripts. She was quite shocked, and it frightened her and made her wonder about her future.
No obstante, durante el mismo año en que se retiró de Warner Brothers, finalmente le ofrecieron un papel que reviviría su carrera, coprotagonizando con la estrella Gary Merrill bajo la dirección de Joseph Mankiewicz.
So many qualities, so often.
Betty was offered the film All About Eve, which was probably the best script that she had read in 5 or 6 years, and she was thrilled to have this movie.
She wasn't the first choice for that. The person to play that part was Claudette Colbert. And Claudette had had an accident, broke her back. And Betty came in and played that part.
And she just made the part her own. She plays a woman who admits to being 40. She plays an actress who is not entirely sympathetic, by far, who is not the kindest of people, who is beset by various problems, jealousies, slings and arrows, and yet you feel for her because she's real.
Don't get up. And please stop acting as if I were the Queen Mother. I'm sorry I didn't mean...
Outside of a beehive, Margot, your behavior would hardly be considered either queenly or motherly.
You're in a beehive, pal, didn't you know? We're all busy little bees, full of stings, making honey day and night.
It was the greatest break at that point in my career that ever happened. There's no question about it. I wouldn't have found that. As I told Mankiewicz, he resurrected me from the dead. There's no question about it.
All About Eve, the Margot Channing role, was a role that she felt had a lot to do with her life and her life as an actress. And I think she was attractive in that film, and she had a lot of the characteristics and the charisma that she had in real life. And then, of course, my dad was involved in it, too, and he's a handsome guy, and, you know, seeing them together is great.
I mean, can you imagine anybody else in the world ever playing Margot Channing? I mean, she just took that part and let it go, and she brought everything that could possibly be brought to that character. It was wonderful.
La película de Bette fue todo un éxito, pero su matrimonio con William Grant Sherry comenzaba a tambalearse.
The marriage with William Grant Sherry was a very volatile one. She wanted a strong husband, but she didn't want him to be any stronger than she wanted him to be. The fights escalated, and Betty said that she felt physically threatened by him, and so eventually she got a restraining order to keep him away from her and filed for divorce.
Sin embargo, Bette había encontrado consuelo en los brazos de Gary Merrill durante los difíciles momentos que vivía su relación con William Grant Sherry.
Shortly after the film was over, they married. Just a day after the divorce from Sherry was finished and his divorce was finished.
Bette disfrutaba ser madre de Bárbara, o BD como la llamaban, y deseaba que creciera la familia, así que la actriz y Gary decidieron adoptar más niños.
After the birth of BD, Betty was told that it would be dangerous for her to have another child. They first adopted a little girl who they named Margot, after Margot Channing, and then a year later adopted little Michael. Within about a year or two of adopting Margot, they realized that she had some problems, and they brought her to a doctor and was told that she was retarded. And they finally put her into a special school that she has been in since then.
My greatest lack of fulfillment for years was the fact I didn't have any children. And I've even been very lucky that way, that now I have a wonderful family of 3 children.
Las presiones que implicaba la nueva familia no eran lo único que Bette tenía que enfrentar. La década de los 50 no favoreció su carrera.
Bette Davis was in and out so many times of popularity, unemployable, suddenly employable again. And even in the great years, she had to fight a lot.
Times change, tastes change to some degree. She was getting a little older. That, I'm sure, was a factor. And the studios didn't really know what kind of parts to give her. The 50s were a difficult time for a lot of stars. Also, it was a difficult time because the studio system itself was breaking down. Television had come along and stolen a lot of the audience. And she wanted to work and needed to work. And she would go wherever there was an audience.
Now, I suppose you would like a recess.
Can we go out and play in the snow?
Oh, I'm afraid it's a little windy for that. We'll have our exercise right here.
Oh, grand.
She liked to be in demand. And if television was offering her parts, and they were decent parts, had any value at all, I think she was happy to do it.
The 50s, she called them 10 dark years, and that was not only because of her marriage to Gary Merrill, which was unhappy, but because professionally, she really wasn't anywhere near the level that she had achieved at Warner Brothers.
Bette continuó filmando, pero las películas sencillamente no alcanzaban su nivel. No era la actriz que todos estaban acostumbrados a ver.
Apple, apple, help an old lady buy an apple. A nickel, thank you, Mr. Rockefeller.
En 1960, Bette se divorció de Gary Merrill. Al año siguiente, su madre, Ruthie, falleció.
She was very close to Ruthie, and constantly would give Ruthie a lot of the credit for what my mother had accomplished.
Her mother felt that she had devoted her life to Betty's career, and I think that Betty absolutely agreed with that.
A pesar de las pérdidas afectivas, la carrera de Bette mejoraba. Protagonizó Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Era un papel distinto a los que había hecho, pero captó la atención del público nuevamente.
Baby Jane came at a time when she really was not getting a lot of good parts, and she saw this as a tremendously challenging role, something she didn't really want to do, but she felt she had to for the family and for her career.
Get away from me! Get away from me!
Betty making Whatever Happened to Baby Jane in 1962 revitalized her career and set upon a second career, which was mostly as a horror maven. That probably isn't what she would have wanted, but it was paying the bills, and it was winning her an Oscar nomination for Baby Jane, and it was keeping her in the public eye. And she had a resurgence in the 1960s. She worked steadily, and I think it was very rewarding for her.
She was very disappointed that she never got the 3rd Academy Award, and she felt that she deserved it for Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Y Bette jamás olvidaba agradecer a quienes la habían ayudado a surgir.
her fans were extremely important to her. I don't know whether it comes across sometimes because of some of the things that people say about how tough she was and what a perfectionist she was. If they came up to her and asked for an autograph, no problem, she would give it. She used to say to me, Mike, without my fans, I have nothing.
El éxito de Bette en Whatever Happened to Baby Jane le aseguró un nicho en el mercado de películas de terror, así que continuó trabajando en dicho género con otras películas como Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte y The Nanny.
What happened in the bathroom, Nanny? I'm sure I don't know what you mean. What happened?
Miss Penn, go back to bed.
What happened?
En 1964, Bette, la hija de Bette, anunció sus planes de contraer matrimonio con un productor de cine de 29 años, Jeremy Hyman.
Betty very much loved her daughter. She allowed her to marry at 16, which most mothers would never do. She gave her a lavish wedding. She didn't have all that much money to do it.
Bette trabajó con mucha continuidad durante la década de los 60, pero ninguno de sus proyectos tuvo gran éxito.
Well, I was a little girl once and used to peek through windows. It was my favorite game.
I like that game.
I still do.
You want to peek at my house?
Sure.
A finales de la década de los 70, comenzó a recibir papeles de mejor calidad.
She did Strangers with Jenna Rollins, where she played a mother, and Jenna Rollins was her daughter. Very strong, solid television drama, and she won an Emmy Award for Strangers.
Efectivamente, la carrera de Bette estaba en pleno auge. Comenzó a trabajar en la televisión. En 1983, protagonizó con otra leyenda del cine, Jimmy Stewart, Right of Way. Luego aparecería en la serie de televisión Hotel. Pero en ese mismo año se le diagnosticó cáncer y tuvo que someterse a una mastectomía. 9 días después de la intervención sufrió una parálisis. Bette estaba delgada y pálida, pero aún no abandonaría su carrera.
A lot of people don't understand that. They say, well, why didn't she just retire? Hang up her dancing shoes. It's hard when you have been in harness all that length of time.
This life begins at 40 is perfect nonsense. It does not. 60 was pretty rough. 70 is awesome.
En 1985, Bette sufrió una de las peores crisis emocionales de su vida cuando su hija Bette publicó un hiriente libro sobre el tipo de madre que había sido.
She was absolutely devastated by this book that her daughter wrote about her, which I think was a frightful thing for Bette to do. And it just upset her so much. She was so miserable about that. At least Bette could wait till she left before she had to read all that crap.
She didn't give Betty credit for any of the wonderful things that Betty did for her all her life. I spoke to a lot of people who were at the same events where Bette would describe Betty behaving horribly and mortifying everyone. And they said, we weren't mortified. We thought she was being delightful and funny and outrageous.
Mientras Bette vociferaba de rabia hacia su madre, el hijo de Bette, Michael, adoptó una actitud muy distinta frente a la escritora.
Growing up with my mother and father and the notoriety that surrounded them really kind of made it difficult for me. I was very embarrassed by it, and I tried to hide the fact, basically, that my parents were who they were. But by the same token, it was a matter of great pride to me. It was difficult on the one hand, but it was great on the other hand.
En 1986, Bette filmó lo que sería su última película, The Whales of August, con Lillian Gish y Ann Sothern.
Betty plays an old woman who's physical infirmities, who needs the help of others, and it was very close to her real life at that point.
I think she was very nervous about this picture because she hadn't had a good part in about 7 or 8 years. I think she felt maybe threatened by Lillian because she wasn't very nice to Lillian. Many times it upset me very much the way she treated Lillian. Lillian was deaf, very deaf, and she wore little things in her ear so that she could hear the lines and that sort of thing. And I think that annoyed Betty quite a bit.
She enjoyed the Wales Vlogs because it was in Maine, which she loved, and brought back a lot of that feeling of New England to her.
It's wonderful to work with a good actress. And she knew her lines, she knew everybody else's lines. She ran the picture. I liked her. I respected her. And I enjoyed working with her. And it was terrible that Betty was so ill and so miserable on the picture. But we all sort of catered to her and made her still feel that she was the star of the picture.
Betty never lost a single brain cell at the end. She was physically weak and very frail, and you'd see her on TV and you'd wonder how she could even hold her head up. And yet she was sharp as a tack. She was funny and she remembered everything.
Al llegar el final de su ilustre carrera, Bette logró olvidar el rencor que sentía por Warner Brothers.
She loved the Warner Brothers years. She said to the end of her life that her career was based on the fact that she was a contract player and that she got a chance to play all kinds of parts.
I think she recognized that they provided her with the opportunity to become a star. But by the same token, there was always a kind of a competitive thing there. I had to fight for what was right. I had to fight for what was mine. And I succeeded, despite them.
I loved it when she laughed. I loved it when she laughed. She never took herself, if she tried to take herself a little too seriously, she'd snap herself out of it.
Can't take any chances now.
Chances? What's all the emergency about?
I've just had a baby in the ladies' room. Help me, dear God, help me. I'm caught on his butt.
There wasn't anything devious about Bette Davis. I mean, she said it, did it, and wrapped it all up, and put a real beautiful ribbon on it, and then gave it a little kick,
En 1989, luego de 58 años en la pantalla grande, Bette Davis fallece a los 81 años. Para sus fans, su legado permanecerá intacto toda una eternidad.
I think they remember that she was a great actress. What do I remember? I think she was a great person.
I think Bette Davis is fondly remembered today for being the image or model, if you will, of a strong, assertive, independent woman.
She was a fine woman. She really was. She was a fine woman living in a very difficult world. Betty used to say it is that I don't want to be liked particularly, I'd like to be understood.
She probably would like to be remembered as the best actress ever. And then after that, the best mother ever.
I think Betty was a sad person. But I'm sure right now that Betty's in heaven ordering everybody around. So she must be a happy lady now, I hope.
It was totally incredible that a little shy Yankee girl from Boston led the life she led.
Pocos meses antes de morir, Bette Davis recibió de la Sociedad Fílmica del Lincoln Center un reconocimiento a su labor artística. Luego de disfrutar de algunas de sus escenas clásicas y de un homenaje de sus compañeros, la actriz subió al estrado. Con sus 81 años ya no se parecía a la estrella de Jezebel, Dark Victory o All About Eve. Pero al tomar el micrófono dijo como solo Bette Davis sabía hacerlo: ¡qué basura! Y el teatro se vino abajo.